Okay, here is the COVID bead tutorial I tried to show you guys during class, but I'm doing it through YouTube now instead. But here I am. I sped up the video because this bead, as I said, takes about 20 minutes to make. But here I am. I've got that didymium screen on, so now you can see what's going on in the flame, and it's filtering out that solar flare, so much easier to see now. So I'm heating up my gray rod of glass. This will be the base bead, and so I'm just heating it up in the flame. I've got it tilted at an angle so it kind of just balls up on itself. I want to get a big blob of glass. This is called a gather in lampworking terms, and I'm going to add this directly to my mandrel and form my base bead. Okay, there's my mandrel as I talked about. It's got that clay coating on it so that I will be able to remove the bead. And I have to heat up the mandrel as well, otherwise the glass won't stick to it. It's got to be a hot mandrel. And so I get the mandrel to glow a little bit. My glass is glowing, and there I am adding it directly to the mandrel. I kind of swooped it all on. It's not very round at this point, but I'm going to let heat and gravity as I roll it around, rotate my mandrel, and it will kind of pull towards the center again and round out. And so now I'm going to speed up a little bit. I'm just going to use gravity. It was a little bit, needed to slump down to the left a little bit. Now I'm going to use my marver and then round it out a bit. And I just do this a little bit both sides until I get a nice spherical shape. A little more marvering. And so that's a graphite marver. Glass doesn't stick to graphite, so a lot of my tools are made out of graphite. Okay, it's looking pretty good. It's pretty round, just giving it one final little shape right there, and then I can go on to the next step. Oh, so this is my COVID bead. This is what I'm basing my design on, is the traditional COVID bead that we see in most of the news. And so I'm going to do those two little dots, those two little orange dots, the little greenish dots, and then also the red protein spikes. So I like to kind of break down images and figure out how to simplify them for my sculptures. And then also on the back you can see I've got that picture for reference as well. I'm very visual, so I like to see kind of a picture of what I'm working on. So either I'll do a sketch out a drawing or post a picture. That helps me a lot. Okay, so now I'm going through, I'm adding the little orange dots. So I'm putting in double dots side by side. There I made my dot a little bit too big, so you can heat up the glass and pull some back off. So that's what I'm doing there. So I've got 4 sets of the orange dots. So now I'm taking my green, and I pulled some of the glass out into skinnier stringers. That gives me a little bit more control when I'm doing small details. So I'm just going kind of in between the orange dots, and I'm putting the green dots. And so there they all are. So now I'm going to melt them down into the bead most of the way. Okay, so now I'm grabbing that maraschino red, and this is what Jennifer, Mrs. Buckle, was talking about. She thought were seed beads that I fused onto the bead. No, it's actually the red glass. I went around and added all those dots directly onto the bead, melted them in from my rods. I don't do fusing. I strictly do most of it all in the flame. Some people will do, you can add in some fused elements, but not, disregard that. Most people just do it all directly in the flame. So there I am. I'm just adding in a whole bunch of dots all around it, making sure not to cover up my green dots or my orange dots, but just, it's not a very precise pattern. I'm just sort of eyeballing it and putting them all around. So now I'm just melting them in about halfway. I want to make sure they're good and secured to the bead. If I don't melt them in enough, there's a chance when the bead cools off, dots can just pop off. And so I need to make sure that they have a good attachment. So now I'm just going through and warming them all up, making sure they're even. One dot's not bigger than the other. And just taking a little look to see if I like the way the dots are all looking. And I think I am. Okay, so now I'm going and I'm going to add kind of blobs on top, so like another dot on top, because for these red protein spikes, they are kind of raised a little bit more. So there it is, a little bit slow motion. See, now I've got a balled up glob of glass on top. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go around and add a little ball on top. That kind of will make those protein spikes stand up a little bit more, because in the image they're raised up and then there's a little triangular shape. And they're my glass. Sometimes the rods do that. They get a little bit of thermal shock and they'll pop like that. That's common. But so I'm going through, I'm adding those balls on top, so it looks more like those protein spikes. But making that triangle shape is really hard. So I use some artistic license and I finish them off a little bit differently. But so now I'm just going through, speeding it up again. I'm adding all of those balls on top, making sure they're all about the same size. I'm also keeping my base bead warm, because if I let the base bead cool down while I'm adding all these details, that can thermal shock and crack. So I do need to make sure I waft it through the flame and keep the base bead warm as well. Okay, there we go. I've added them all. Some of them I added a little bit more glass to, because they weren't big enough, and so they're not quite as rounded as I would like. So now I'm just going back through and rounding them all out. You'll see them glow nice and hot, get in that molten stage where they'll then round up some more. And when I start to spin it, that will be when I'm almost done, because then I'm just warming everything up, making sure, there we go, everything has a good attachment. So now I'm basically done with this bead. I'm going to pop it in the kiln, and then the next part of the video is going to be me putting it together. Oh, no. I forgot, there's one more step that I'm going to do. I put these little impressions in each of the dots. That's how I finish these off. So I take my other graphite tool and I just heat up each little dot and I poke it and put an impression. So if you go back and look at the picture, you'll see that each little protein spike has a little divot in it. I just thought that looked kind of cool. Some of the other models of COVID kind of look like that with the little impressions. So that was just my artistic way of finishing off these beads. Okay, so now I'm done, and I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to put it in the kiln, and then the rest of the voice video will be after it came out of the kiln the next day and the colors came back to normal, and how I finish up the bead. Aha, here we go. Okay, this is the next day. This is what it looks like out of the kiln, and you can see all the little dots and everything. And so I'm going to wire it up to look like that little zipper pull right there. So here I have some 21 gauge a head pin, some 3mm little silver balls. These are the spacer beads I made with the maraschino glass, and a lanyard, a zipper pull. So I'm just going to put the spacers, the little silver, and then the maraschino, and then my bead, maraschino spacer again, the silver bead, and now it's going to look more like a round COVID virus. So there we go. That looks much better now. And so now I'm going to show you just quickly how to wire it up, which most of you guys all know, but I take my bent nose pliers and I push down with my thumb, make a 90-degree angle, just like that. And then I'm going to take my round nose pliers and I grab the wire right there. I want a medium-sized loop, so I'm going to put it halfway up. I'm going to wrap around and then take it out, switch it to the bottom side. Now I can finish going around and finish that loop. Pull it out. There's my loop. I'm going to take my bent nose pliers and just grab on to that loop so I have a good handle so I can hold on to it. And I'm going to wrap around. And this is 21 gauge. It's kind of stiff. Plus I have the camera right in the way. So this is not the best wrap job because it was very awkward with the camera right there, the cell phone. I'm not super proud of this wrap, but it shows you basically how I do it. So I wrap around about 3 times until it's a little bit more snug. And then I get my wire cutters. Oops, I bumped the camera right there. There's my wire cutters. And I snip it right
at the end there, hold on to it so the wire piece doesn't fly off when I cut it. It's still poking out a teeny bit, so I'm going to grab my bent nose pliers and just sort of press down and tuck in that little wire end so it's not sticking out and sharp. And then sometimes if it's still, even when I press it in, if I can still feel that it's rough, I will take a file and sort of try to file off any sharp edges. But that one got it in well enough, it wasn't rough. And then I just slide it into my zipper pull, my lanyard clip, whatever that's called, and then I'm done. And that's all there is to it. Pretty easy.